I'm the product of a one-night stand. Miracle favored me before I was even born. And I've seen miracles happen all throughout my life. This is one of them. Or at least that's what I think. Tell me what you think and leave a like if you like my story. I grew up with a void in my life. No father. Never had one. Never seen one. At the age of about 5 or 6, I realized that all of my friends had one. Out of curiosity, I asked my mother if I had a dad, especially when I saw other kids playing with their dads. Whenever I asked, she'd always try to distract me or say something like, "You'll meet him someday." I guess her words came to pass, because this is my father here, lying on this hospital bed, struggling to stay alive. The strange thing is, I put him there. We crossed paths in almost tragic circumstances. Literally. That's just part of my story. But before I get into that, let me tell you about the events that took place leading up to this point. My mother told me that she went to a party in her teenage years with her friends where she met a guy, a complete stranger. At the time, she was young and very naive, and the vibe was on a high. They exchanged numbers and he brought my mother round after round. For the rest of the night, they were the center of each other's attention. Well, he only had one thing on his mind. The liquor took its toll on both of them. Everything was going to plan for him. They went back to his car where they spent the night. They were awoken by the car park security the following morning. He took her to a nearby cafe for breakfast. For my mother, this was the start of something new. But for him, this was just one more girl on his long, long list. When they finished eating, he dropped my mother off at the nearest bus stop. And that was the last time she would see him for the next 25 years. Later that evening, my mother rang him. When he answered the phone, she identified herself. The person on the other side of the line said, "Don't call back this phone. I don't know what you expect from me. Just to make it clear, it was a one-night stand and nothing more." Then the line went dead. She was in shock. A sinking feeling hit her. She sat there in disbelief, her eyes filled with tears. She felt ashamed, used, and refused. She ignored all the calls from her friends. She knew they were calling for gossip about last night's event. She just went to her room and cried. A few weeks later, she found out that she was expecting. She was scared. She didn't know what to tell her parents. She felt like she had let them down. She didn't know how to face her friends. She had nowhere to turn. She thought about calling him, but judging from the way he acted the last time they spoke, she was terrified. She hesitated to call, but her back was against a wall, and with no one else to turn to, she texted him. The text read, "Hi, I know you said I should never contact you again. I'm really sorry to bother you, but I'm pregnant and I don't know what to do." His reply was, "Don't try put this on me. I'm sure you've been sleeping around with multiple guys. Why call me? It's not my fault you didn't protect yourself. Get rid of it." He made her feel worse than she already was. My mother's words were, "I haven't been with anyone else for the last 12 months apart from you. Mark my words. God will deal with you." Those words are powerful, and they will come to pass later in the story. Just stay tuned. The most bizarre thing happened. My mother had no idea what to do. Deep down, a voice was telling her to keep the pregnancy. But the situation wasn't ideal. She went to a clinic with the intention to abort the pregnancy. After she took the abortion pill and left to go home, she felt sick. Cold sweats were washing her body. Suddenly she vomited. Her breakfast and everything else she ate came out, including the pill. She went back to the clinic. The nurse gave her another tablet. 5 minutes after taking it, her body rejected the second abortion pill. The nurse said to her, "I've never seen that happen before. Everything happens for a reason. I'm not a religious person, but maybe that's God's way of saying keep it." It was a short sentence, but those words meant something to my mother. She broke down in tears and left. When she got home, she hugged her parents and started to cry. She explained how she got pregnant, how she tried to abort the pregnancy, and how sorry and ashamed she was. "Sorry to let you guys down," she said to her parents. My grandparents said, "My dear, you didn't let us down. People make mistakes, but they don't correct them by making another one. We are sorry that you went through that alone, without telling us." My grandparents supported my mother throughout her pregnancy. My mother was their only child. She never dated again, and we lived with my grandparents up until this day. That was my mother's story. Now, let me tell you my story, but most importantly, how I met my father. If you're liking the story so far, please give it a thumbs up to help the algorithm. Thank you. To cut a long story short, I lived a good life. As an only child, I was spoiled by my grandparents and my mother. I studied IT at school, but I opted not to go to university, simply because I think it's overrated. But don't let that put you off. Everybody chooses their own path, and that's the path that I chose. I mean, you go to university for what? 3 to 4 years? You pay a bag of money. You spend 45% of the time learning and the other 55% messing around. Then, when you're finished, you're in debt. You try to join the workforce and they tell you that you haven't got any experience. So I decided to grab the bull by the horns. I got an apprenticeship in IT, learning and getting paid at the same time. I was very good at what I do. After the end of the apprenticeship, I was offered a permanent position in the company. I felt so excited. I was driving home after celebrating with a few of my colleagues when a man walked out from between 2 parked cars. When he connected with my car, he flew about 10 feet in the air and landed on the car bonnet. I was shaking like a leaf on a windy day. I frantically reached for my mobile and I called the ambulance. Within minutes, they arrived. The police also came. They took my statement and my contact details. When I got home, I told my mother what had happened. The next day, she accompanied me to the hospital to visit the man. When we got there, his family was by his bedside. Upon seeing him, my mother burst into tears and ran out of the room. At that moment, I had no idea why. Anyway, I proceeded. I apologized for what I had done. His mother's words were, "You better pray he doesn't die, because you will go to prison for the rest of your life, and you will pay for your carelessness." All of his family stared at me angrily. Just then, my mother came back into the room and said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry that he didn't die on the spot for what he put me through." His family was shocked. I was surprised and disappointed to hear my mother say such a thing. She was the most loving and caring person I've ever known, so there had to be a reason. But what was even more shocking was when my mother started to explain to his family and myself, of course, what had happened 25 years ago. While he lay there with his eyes filled with tears, he spoke and he said, "Your mother's last words to me were, 'God will deal with you.' And he has dealt with me. The last 20 years I've lived a miserable life. I had 2 failed marriages. I almost died of food poisoning. And I was exposed to radiation a few years back. For some reason, every time something scary happened to me, I remember your mother's words, 'God will deal with you.' I spent 10 years of my life thinking that I had a son only to find out that I'm not his father. But I deserved it." Then he turned to me and said, "I saw the car coming, but I chose not to stop. I walked right out in front of your car. I don't know why I did that, because I love my life. God must have sent you at the right time.
I had no idea you existed.
Then he turned to my mother and said,
Nothing I can say will change what I've done. The hurt I've caused you. I just want to say sorry.
Then my mother said, It was 25 years ago for you. It was just a good time. For me, it was emotional. It's up to your daughter if she wants to get to know you. But if you hurt her, I'll run you over myself. All of his family gathered around me and my mother. I finally found my father. I hope he lives up to it. I think it's fair to give him a second chance. I had a second chance, even before I was born. After 25 years, my life has changed in 24 hours. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give the video a thumbs up. Thank you for your support. Your support means the world to me, and it helps this channel grow.